Unit 10, Part A. First topic in the field of cryptography. We're going to talk today about principles of cryptography, about the basic underlying rules, principles, definitions, terms that make up the field of cryptography, the art of writing secretly that's been in use for thousands of years, been codified mathematically for a couple of hundred years, and has become the underpinning of modern internet electronic commerce. What's cryptography? It literally comes from words meaning secret writing, crypto and graphy. It's the art of keeping messages secure. I like to refer to it as exchanging a lot of small secrets for one big secret. Because, the thing is, cryptography doesn't really create security. What it does is moves it around. You have a lot of things that you need to keep secure, so you encrypt them. And what you've done is you've exchanged those lot of things you want to keep secure for one small thing that you need to keep secure and very secure, and that's a cryptographic key. So you're just taking a lot of big data that needs to be secured, that you'd otherwise want to keep secret. You encrypt it, and you have a little bit of small data that must be kept very, very secure, your cryptographic key. Cryptography can help provide authentication, data integrity, privacy, and non-repudiation. It's not just for keeping secrets. Part of a cryptographic protocol can provide authentication, provided you trust the source of the keys being presented to you. Data integrity, it can detect tampering with messages, can provide, of course, privacy and non-repudiation. Repudiation is I did something and then later on I deny it, and you have no way of disproving my denial. Non-repudiation means doesn't matter if I deny it or not, you have proof that I did it. This is very important, particularly in financial realms, where parties could make financial commitments and then walk away from them later if they became inconvenient, denying they ever made the commitment in the first place. Kind of like if you pulled money out of an ATM machine and then called up your bank an hour saying, it wasn't me, someone stole my card. That would be non-repudiation. Related to cryptography are other areas of studies. There's cryptanalysis, which is, I call it the science of uncovering secrets, but it's really as much an art as a science. It's how you break the codes that other people use. There's also cryptology, and that's the mathematics behind cryptography and cryptanalysis. A lot of logic, a lot of discrete math, a lot of very difficult stuff that a lot of very smart people work on. Where is cryptography used? It's used in a lot of places in a modern-day network, in managing servers, managing clients. We've talked about session layer security through SSL. SSL is at its heart a cryptographic protocol. It's a set of conventions, of rules for the client and the server to talk to each other, to establish their mutual identity, to assert that they do want to exchange messages, to set up keys for them to exchange those messages, and to do so securely so somebody listening into these conversations can't actually insert themselves or spoof one of the endpoints. We also looked at network layer security. VPNs and IPsec also makes a great deal of use of cryptography, not just for encryption, but for message authentication. In the wireless field at the data link layer, WEP and WPA have used or attempted to implement cryptography, and, as we saw in the prior class in network security, with varying degrees of success. On host-type systems, Microsoft's encrypting file system, EFS, and a related tool of Microsoft called BitLocker, keeps stored files secure, especially on laptop computers that may easily be stolen. In this case, what you've got is a piece of hardware, a laptop, that can easily walk away, be taken by a bad guy, and you want to make sure the data on that laptop cannot be easily accessed by the bad guy. So you encrypt it using an encrypting file system that relies on a key. And if you've got a good key, then chances are the bad guy would have a very hard time recovering your data. We also talked in earlier classes about malware and software that can be tampered with and turned into, say, a Trojan horse. Software that looks like good, valid software, but in fact contains something that an evildoer has planted inside of it. What we have is cryptography for so-called code signing, where you can verify the author of the code. You can verify that if you download an update from Microsoft or some other well-defined source, that update, in fact, is really coming from Microsoft and is the genuine good. Microsoft refers to this as authenticode, And in open source software, you often have digital signatures distributed with the product that you need to verify to say, hey, is this version of Mozilla or OpenOffice the genuine thing, or is it got some backdoor planted by a criminal organization that will cause them to pull all the money out of my financial accounts? Well, you've got a digital signature that helps you to better determine whether that software is bona fide or not. A lot of authentication methods for obtaining access to hosts and servers and networks also rely on cryptography. We've spoken a bit about Kerberos, which relies exclusively on an older form of cryptography called symmetric key encryption. We also have mentioned, Radius along with TACACS that encrypt the authentication traffic going through the network so remote access users can securely log in, and we have some assurance that a malicious third party cannot steal their authentication credentials, and so on. These are all cryptographic applications. They're all over the place now. They're embedded in the framework of what we do. There's hardly an e-commerce site out there that doesn't use SSL, for example. And underlying all of this is various forms of cryptography. Cryptographic definitions. Basic definitions, these are really important. What's called plain text is the in the clear message prior to encryption. The plain text is the stuff that you don't want the bad guys to be able to read. You want your intended recipient to read it, and you of course need to read it. But the reason why you encrypt it is to make sure that it can't be read. So what you do is you take your plain text and you turn it into ciphertext. That's plain text that has been encrypted. Now, how do you get the plain text to turn into ciphertext? There's two components. One component is the key, which is a secret or protected value used by the encryption algorithm to create ciphertext from plain text. This is the small secret that you use to encrypt a big secret. And then you've got the algorithm. You put the key and the plain text through the algorithm, and the algorithm encrypts the plain text. The encrypted ciphertext comes out on the other side. The algorithm, by the way, should not be assumed to be secret. This has been a principle of cryptography since the 19th century, developed by a guy named Kirchhoff, that you should assume that the mechanism you use for encrypting a message can always be obtained and reverse engineered by your opponent. So the security of your crypto system has to all reside in the key. Now you've got keys, you've got several different essential, I almost said key, definitions of key stuff. Key space, all possible keys for a given encryption algorithm. If your key is, 3 alphabetical characters that are all uppercase, and instead of all possible keys is 26 times 26 times 26 for that. Most modern cryptographic algorithms use key spaces that are 2 to the 128th because they're expressed in binary. The set of all possible keys. What are you allowed to use? The bigger the key space in general, the more secure the cryptography you've got. Not always, but all other things being equal. That's true, because the more possible keys, the harder it is for someone to guess that keys or to find it. Key management is a system. It's a process for generating, distributing, storing, and destroying cryptographic keys. How do you get the keys out of there? Flaws in key management can really expose a crypto system. If you can't trust how a key is generated or distributed or stored, then it doesn't matter how good your algorithm is, because somebody can take advantage of flaws in key management to get into the system. Now, when we talk about cryptography, there's two types of cryptography. There's something called a code, which we don't deal with nowadays because it's not something that computers handle very well, but it was dealt with 100 up through the Renaissance. It's a crypto system, here I'm jumping ahead a bit, that deals with linguistic units. Kind of a dictionary where you have the real world word and you look up in your dictionary and you find the fake word, and you hope that your opponent can't guess the real world word from the fake word. It's like the old spy movies where there'd be a radio message saying the sun sets in the east, and the sky is green, means bomb Berlin at noon tomorrow. That's a code. It deals with linguistic units. Ciphers encode symbols. They don't deal with linguistic units. They deal with the symbols that make up a language, letters, bits, and bytes. So you've got types of cipher, and ciphers are really what we deal with computers, and all we're going to talk about from now on. You've got a permutation cipher, and that shuffles or recombines things. think about a deck of cards, and if you shuffle them, suppose you could take all the letters that make up all the words in a very big book and just kind of scramble them, and only somebody who knew how to unscramble them could figure out the book. You'd have a permutation cipher. A substitution cipher is a cipher that substitutes plain text with something else. Bits, bytes, other patterns to make ciphertext. Most modern ciphers involve both permutation and substitution. They're algorithms that computers implement that both shuffle stuff around and substitute things for other things. The last definition we're going to get into is a really fun area called steganography, hiding a secret message in another innocuous message. Is that picture on eBay actually contain a hidden message for a terrorist group? People have wondered that. In fact, there are ways you can hide substantial messages in common graphic files like photographs and so forth, where somebody looking at the photograph can't tell there's a message hidden in it, but somebody at the other end who knows there is a message and has the ability to find it can decode the message. It's a way of hiding information in something else. So here's the basics of cryptography. You take your plain text here and your key and your algorithm, which I'm showing as a gear, because an algorithm is kind of like a machine. In the old days, 100 years ago, cryptography was in fact done by machines that had gears. In fact, the German Enigma that was used during the Second World War was basically a bunch of gears with wires and light bulbs. So the plain text and the key go in one end, and the ciphertext comes out the other. And a neat thing about this form of cryptography called symmetric key encryption is you reverse the algorithm, take the ciphertext, take the key, and you get the plain text back out. So you can run the system in reverse and get out what you put in as long as you've got the key. Now the steps in cryptography, it's not just a matter of taking a key and an algorithm and a message and making it secret. There's a whole lot of things that go on with cryptography in addition to that. You have key generation. You have to create the keys in the first place. You have to make sure the keys are random. You have to make sure the keys can't be easily guessed by an opponent. You have to make sure you don't reuse keys too often. Maybe there are certain types of keys that in a certain crypto system are really bad to use because they have flaws in them. So key generation is the first step. The second step is key distribution. Once you've generated the keys, how do you securely get it to the other party? And if you could distribute the key securely, why not just use that secure method to distribute the message and do away with the cryptography? That's an interesting question, and we can have some answers to that later. But key distribution is how you get a key from there to there. In a simple form of encrypting messages, you encrypt your plain text. You take an ordinary message, add the algorithm and the key, and create something secure that looks like gibberish, that looks like noise to a third party. And then the person receiving that message decrypts it, takes the encrypted message, and generates the original back. Now, crypto systems consist on a software level of several layers of components. Layered models are good things. They help simplify how we view the world. At the bottom, we have algorithms, which are just methods for taking plain text, taking a key, and generating ciphertext from it. DES, the data encryption standard, RSA, Blowfish, AES, etc. are all algorithms. They just take something, usually of a fixed size, combine it with a key, and generate something else. Now, in some cases, you have block-oriented ciphers, but the text that you're trying to push through, the data you're trying to push through the cipher, doesn't fit the size of the block that the cipher takes. How do you take a whole bunch of stuff and shove it through a particular cipher and make it come out the other end? There's different ways of doing it, and these are called modes. A mode is how you take an indefinite or ill-defined stream of data, get it to fit into an encryption algorithm, and get something out the other side. How do you divide up the plain text so that your algorithm can operate on it and create ciphertext? Do you just split it up? Do you encrypt one bit at a time? Do you take something from your previous encryption and use it to salt the next one to make it more secure? These are all modes. Now, on top of the mode is something called a protocol. A protocol is a conversation between the two endpoints in a cryptographic system that establishes a pattern, a means of us communicating between the two of them. Protocols involve things like key exchange, signature verification, and so on. It's a complex form of discussion between the endpoints that allows them to make use of the modes and the algorithms. Finally, on top, we've got the application itself. Do you want to secure email? Do you want to allow credit cards to go over an unsecure network to pay for goods? What are we trying to do here? What's the application? The application relies on a protocol. The protocol may rely on cryptographic modes, and this all relies on various algorithms. So at the top layer of the application oftentimes ties together many different protocols, many different algorithms, sometimes even different modes, into something that is useful to the end users, that helps protect something of value. Now there's two types of cryptography. In traditional symmetric, or sometimes called private key cryptography, the key you encrypt with is the same as the key you decrypt with. So in key distribution, one party provides the other party with a key, and that opposing party then, now that it has a copy of the same key, can encrypt something, and the first party can decrypt it. So you see what we've got here is one key possessed by two people, the same key. One person uses that key to encrypt, sends a secret message across the wires. The other person receives that message, uses that same key to decrypt. That's symmetric key encryption. It's the most common. It's been around historically, literally for thousands of years. Was used in ancient Rome. The so-called Caesar cipher is a form of symmetric key encryption. In that cipher, you take a message and you take every letter of that message and shift it 3 places in the alphabet. It sounds like a real simple first grade type of encryption algorithm, but back in days when just being literate was very rare, it worked pretty well. It's used to this day. Symmetric key algorithms are very, very fast, operate very efficiently in computers, so are used for a lot of the heavy lifting in encryption. They're very well known, and we make very good, very secure ones.